Hey, it's JC1424 once again with another album review, and today we're going to be talking about Linkin Park's comeback 8th studio album, From Zero. I found these through a Spotify ad, so I got them for Christmas. And oh my goodness, if that was not just a difficult maneuver right there. But anyhow, this is coming 7 years after the unfortunate passing of Chester Bennington, who was lost due to suicide. He was their third vocalist after it was started by Mike Shinoda, and then Mark Wakefield was singing for them, and then he got pushed out by a record label. Chester Bennington auditioned just before he was about to give up on his entire career, and they wound up having a really strong 15 to 20 year tenure together. Now, I'm not going to say One More Light was really solid, because half of it I just felt like Chester's voice was a little too dry for the mix, and then it was outdated even for pop standards. But those first 6 albums, mwah, chef's kiss right there. But with Rob Borden not wanting to play drums anymore and the loss of Chester, we have Colin Britton, I think it is, on drums now, who has a pretty big resume, by the way. And then Emily Armstrong as a new vocalist, who was previously singing for Dead Sarah, a band I talked about in monthly music digest that I used to do 4 years ago. But no more delays. This was released on November 15th, 2024. I think the lead single for this album, with its big live comeback show, was September 5th, 2024, so a couple months prior. This opening track is an intro, and it's got a neat gag with one of Mike's kids, I think, realizing the lore to all this, and then getting cut off by the lead single. And it's like one of those perfectly cut screams, except it's dialogue before the first song on an album. Track 2 is that lead single, The Emptiness Machine, and it begins their cryptically teased comeback in the most familiar way possible. Because Mike takes the floor first, just like on Hybrid Theory, and he has a commanding but soft opening with the delivery of the verse and the chorus. It's accompanied by some drums that do hold back a bit, and it's got a piano that's reminiscent of Transformers, actually. The guitar and Emily then just come crashing and rocking in, and they return with a message of finding freedom and escaping a toxic cult of sorts. And that's the most I'm gonna say on that shit.
Already under my skin, and I know exactly how this ends. I let you cut me open just to watch me bleed. Gave up who I am for who you wanted me to be.
Track 3, Cut the Bridge, is one that I heard get compared to Billy Talent in some reviews. I've never listened to Billy Talent, so I have no idea what that means, but it's the first instance that I think Linkin Park has ever been remotely pop-punk. I've listened to all their albums and a bunch of B-sides, and nothing that I heard actually resembles this very much. I don't hate it, I'm just not quite that blown away. To me, it's like an angrier Paramore or a less dark Flyleaf or something. It's also not a genre that I often hear bent to have rapped verses. It fits Emily's grit in the chorus, though, the way it builds up to that. It's also one of many songs on this album to layer her voice over itself, all weird. It distracts from the delivery, which is supposed to express tension and from a bad influence that you might have with somebody.
Just to watch it burn.
And then track 4 is Faint from Meteora. Not exactly, but it pretty much recycles that song. Heavy is the Crown was the second single for this album, the first to follow up The Emptiness Machine, and I think it was specifically written as a League of Rage Shadow Legends anthem or whatever, so almost all its lore is tied to that. The only conclusion that I could draw, that it could take any context of what's actually going on here, though, is that Emily is taking on some huge responsibilities in this new Linkin Park era. That's about all I got. Structure-wise, it is a complete duplicate of Faint from Meteora. It also has a 16-second nod to Chester's screaming "Given Up," but that's not even from this album right here, so that's neat, I guess. The chorus is super catchy, but Mike's verse I still haven't taken much from after all this time, never caught on to me. There's other elements reused, like the organ keys that I recognize from New Divide, and then there's the layering of Emily's voice on this song. It actually works all right here.
Today's gonna be the day you notice, 'cause I'm tired of explaining what you do. This is what you asked for!
Over Each Other, the third single for this album, and track 5, portrays someone who keeps fighting for a relationship even when there is nothing left to fight for. Albeit one of the more unique atmospheres of the album, it doesn't entirely live up to its potential, in my opinion. It has the volume and the composition needed to be impactful. Emily's voice is smooth, emotional, loud, and powerful, but the low guitar chords only seem present for rhythmic purposes. The drums decorate the music more. They're going off on some kind of Blink-182 tangent here. This is kind of like Green Day when the guitar rarely actually adds anything to the fucking music.
I can't go to sleep. I lie awake at night. I'm so tired of talking over each other. So say what's underneath. I wanna see your side.
I don't know why I made it sound as if that's not a really good song from my perspective. It just doesn't live up to the hype that I feel within the song itself. But track 6, Casualty, is one of my favorites on this album, and I loved The Hunting Party. This gnarly punk, bass-oriented energy comes as a surprise. There's a body count style delivery from Mike in the verses that I heard everyone in the studio loved, and I do too. Then you got Emily in her screamy pants, as they call them, in her little gifs and gaffs between each song, and she just sounds demented. Then you got Mr. Hahn peeking in before a breakdown, and that's one of my favorite parts of the song. Not necessarily the breakdown itself, that part's fine, but thematically I find this to be a rehash of Victimized from Living Things, but I find it to be more progressive elementally and within the structure itself.
Put through the paces, but I got left behind. But I'm not running,
'Cause something's coming.
it's only a matter of time.
Let me out. Set me free. I know I'm safe 'cause you can't.
The 6th song on this album, Overflow, is track 7. It has a similar production concept as Session from Meteora, that interlude thing, where it's got that swallowing up mix as it builds up to the end. Except it's put into song form. It took a while for that sonic build-up to really grow on me with Mike's Post Malone-ish inflection from the very beginning, but the filthy guitar textures beneath Emily's silky voice make the chorus and outro ferocious. And it seems to be flushing out tension and approaching rebellious means in an uncanny or ominous manner.
Now I'm out of control. I keep on feeling it all. To overflow. To overflow.
It took me a while to realize this, but something neat they did right here on the album after Overflow was add a soundbite of someone taking a cassette tape, flipping it, and then putting it back into the player just before track 8, Two-Faced, the 7th song on the album, begins. And there is a cassette version of this album if you wanted to collect them and still listen to them for the novelty's sake, even though they sound like shit. And I'm curious if the second side of that tape starts with this song like it does right here. Because then, even on CD, vinyl, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to the album, you get that experience of hearing someone take out the tape, even if it's not you. And yeah, they're just heavy on the fan service. Half of Meteora was recycling that One Step Closer formula, and now it's like a 6-part saga with songs like this. Mike's rapped verses are more catchy than the ones he did on Heavy as the Crown, in my personal opinion. And then Emily's chorus is too, but I don't find it necessarily as impressive. That raggedy guitar, though, sounds so unprocessed. And it's like if nu metal was on the 2014 album, which that just sounds like a neat idea. I would vouch for a nu metal version of The Hunting Party. And it's got that message of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. So like a sociopath friendship, I don't know.
You should have recognized it's too late for choosing sides. Two-faced, caught in the middle, caught in the middle.
Last time you told me it wasn't true and pointing every finger at things that you didn't do.
Track 9, Stained, is the most mainstream skewed pop rock song on here. It's the most feminine material that they've ever done as far as I'm concerned. The wavy, pretty parts that are written for Emily don't remotely seem like they could be sung by a dude. And she's not a dude. I'm not saying this is a bad or good thing inherently. It's just something I'm observing, really. But this is an expression of trust being broken and that leaving a scar or a stain on a relationship with somebody, which is something that they talk about in a bit on the very next song. But man, we got some storytelling on this album. That's awesome. But it couldn't quite be recognized as Linkin Park at first glance on its own. But, you know, there are some Meteora remnants in the percussion if you dig into the details of this. But the mix is morphed in a way that fits the album with a modern 21 Pilots type execution, from my perspective.
Close lips, smile, cause there's blood in your teeth. What you forget, you were gonna repeat. You don't get to make amends like your head's still clean.
Because you're scared. You try to hide the mark, but it won't fade.
If there's a song that resembles the cover art of this album best, I have to say it's got to be that last one. But track 10, I Give You Everything I Had, or as it's abbreviated, has this hunting party / Meteora fused instrumental that I find phenomenal. It's got that 46-2 type riff while the drums hit hard with some sick fills, and the guitar opens it to a quaint tone before ripping into a load of bass. And you know JC loves some good bass in rock music. Emily ingrains closure into the outro of the song with the line that she repeats as it burns off all this energy with that final chord that just plays out. And like I said, it continues the theme from the last song that you can only give and forgive so much before unrequited codependency just wears the fuck out.
And the clock keeps ticking, rules are written.
Trying to remember how to make up my mind.
Clock keeps ticking, rules are written.
Forgotten doesn't mean that it's forgiven this time. I give you everything I have. All you give me is your own bleeding.
The 10th and final song, Good Things Go, the 11th track because we had an intro, of course, but it explains how depression pushes away people who are just trying to help and hurts those closest to us as a result. The jaded percussion and guitars combine a sound from Living Things with like reggae pop, I suppose. It's one of Mike's more nuanced singing and rap approaches up until this point, I think, with this chill and relaxed vibe. Then it gets a little bit jumpy. There are some soaring vocals from Emily that paint this sincere and conclusive imagery. And that's an important element, in my opinion, is that an album should sound like it's about to end when it is ending. But I gotta admit, it's one of the weakest endings to a Linkin Park album, though. But it does have going for it. It's a better ending than that album had. I think that's a given for most people. Anyhow, my final score for Linkin Park's 8th studio album, released on November 15th, 2024, From Zero, is a 91%. So that's a B+ on my scale. That might sound high, but it really isn't for my standards. It's slightly above average for professionally produced material that we should expect from Mike Shinoda at this point. Recycling old ideas is fine. This is supposed to be like this all-encompassing comeback after all these years. And, I mean, it'd make more sense than coming back like going from the hunting party to One More Light when they're adding a new vocalist and a new drummer. They want to come back with familiarity, you know? There's a few either phoned in, such as two-faced ideas, or forced ideas, which you could say the same thing about that, like we have with Stained, where there's a little femininity in the vocals of the song and how they're written for Emily. It's not like someone else could sing it and it would make much sense, well, to me at least. But, man, I think the best way to describe my ranking of this album among others is that I like it more than, you know, a few of their albums as a whole. It's a more cohesive project. But there are other songs on those same albums that I think this album is better than, that are better than anything on this album. Like, for example, Waiting for the End is better than anything on this album, but I like this album more than, well, the one that Waiting for the End was on, the concept album. And I guess I could say the same thing for Living Things. I like this new album more than Living Things, but man, there's a lot of songs on Living Things that are better than anything on here. But man, I'm about to have a brain tumor from how many attempts I just did on this final section of the video. See you next time, that's that. And Linkin Park Marathon, for now, over.
asked for forgiveness 100 times.